Hello, and welcome to another video. Today we're working on this piece of my OC Kira in my finished sketchbook. I don't think you guys have seen my finished sketchbook for a couple of months at this point. I think one of my very first drawings on this channel was a drawing in my finished sketchbook, which is kind of ironic because I never did finish that piece. I'm going to get around to finishing it eventually. I just haven't finished it yet, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so basically this is just a sketchbook that I have that it's supposed to be for only finished pieces. And I really didn't have any idea what I wanted to draw this week, so I was like, I'm just gonna go ahead and do a simple portrait drawing of my OC Kira, who is part of that mafia story I told you guys about a couple of times. Yeah, so I finally settled on a name for her, and it's Kira. So I'm just gonna draw her for this picture, and I drew it off camera. I thought about drawing the sketching process, but I don't really feel comfortable doing like finished pieces sketching on camera, so I just did it off camera for this video. And then I also went ahead and did the lining also off camera, just because same reason for the sketching. I don't really feel comfortable doing line art in front of the camera. That's just me. I take a lot of focus doing it, so I prefer to do it on my own. And so the reason the line art is in that pink color is just because I was determined that I was gonna just make this a simple portrait where I did it. I wanted to incorporate more color into my pieces, and so I was like, well, what if I just did it pink with different shades of pink? And I was like, even if something is like pink or whatever, it's still technically a monochrome piece. So this is a monochrome piece, so it's not exactly more colorful. I guess it's more colorful than black and gray, only in that black and gray are not really colors and pink is, but it's still a monochrome piece, so it's not super colorful. But I just wanted to do something because I wanted to do something in this sketchbook again. It's been a really long time since I've really drawn anything in my finished sketchbook, and you know what? It's actually a detriment to me because I actually forgot what this paper is like. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I really don't. It's not that I don't like the way the coloring for this came out. You're not gonna see all of the coloring just because I got about halfway through it, and I was like, I need to take a break or I am gonna cry. So, yeah, but now that I've stepped away from it for a while, I actually don't think it's a bad coloring at all. I do think I do achieve what I was going for, but while I was in it, I was actually really suffering mentally, so I had to take a break from what I was working on and look at the piece a little bit more objectively. If you're ever drawing something for a really long time and you're thinking this is really ugly and I hate it, and no matter what I do, I can't fix it, before you spend even more time fiddling with it and trying to fix mistakes that you can see, that you think you can see, maybe take a break, right? Take a breather, 5-10 minutes, grab a snack, grab something to drink, go for a little bit of a walk, and then come back to it. Because I promise you, when you come back to it, it's gonna look a little bit better. So when you are staring at something for a really long time, it kind of warps it in your mind, right? And that's in both a good way and a bad way. So if you're like, oh, I take a break from, like, if you're looking at a piece and you're like, this looks really good, and then you leave and you come back and you're like, oh wait, this is actually really messed up. But then also, if you're like, this is really bad, and then you take a break and you're like, oh, it's actually not as bad as I thought it was. So it's good to take breaks when you're doing your art. Don't just sit there for 30 minutes like I did with this one, staring at it and beating yourself up because it's not coming out the way you planned it. Because it's not that it's not coming out the way that you planned it. It's just that you've been staring at it too long, and you just need to give your eyes a rest. So now that you know that I don't actually super hate this piece, and then it is kind of what I'm going for by the end of it, I can go ahead and just tell you guys all of the mistakes I felt like I make while I was coloring this. So basically, it's been a really long time since I've used this sketchbook, and I kind of felt like I forgot what the paper is like. So this is an Ohuhu marker pad. It's in the 9 by 12, I think, or it's like 8.5 by 11. So one of those sizes, right? And so it's this really smooth paper, which is typically what I like for markers. But I forgot the way that the markers interact on the paper, I guess. So when I'm coloring it in flat, nothing really happens, which is fine. But I feel like since it's thicker paper, the marker was sitting on top of the paper for a little bit longer than I'm used to. I think usually I'm more used to the marker kind of soaking in a little bit faster, just because in my regular sketchbook that I have right now, it's not really for markers, so it kind of like soaks into the paper a little bit faster. But with this paper, it is specifically made for markers, so it is sitting on top of the paper for a little bit longer. So even though I colored all of her face in, when I go in and I waited a second, right? When I go in with this second marker, it starts to feather a lot. And I was like, and that's good for blending in certain instances. Like, you want marker kind of to feather into each other a little bit. That's how you get like a good seamless blend. But I was like, oh no, I don't like the way that this looks. And I don't remember the paper acting like this before. But then I look back at some of the stuff and I'm like, oh, wait, it kind of did act like this. But also, I was like, what is going on? I was freaking out a little bit. I don't know if you can see me hesitating a little bit. Not yet, but you'll see me in a second start to like look at it and be kind of like, I'm not sure if you will, because I always cut out when like my hands do pauses or what I think and stuff, just because I feel like that's boring to look at. And it makes the video longer unnecessarily, and then I have to talk for a little bit longer. But yeah, so I colored it in, but I was like, this is not it. But first I was like, okay, I wanted to do really dynamic lighting. So I looked up a reference on the internet. I just found something on Google real fast just so I can see a more dynamic lighting situation. And I just wanted to have the light coming from the left side of the page, and I wanted it to be like a really strong shadow. And so I did this one, right? And I was like, this is not very strong. And then I feel like I was like, okay, so the shadow is not very strong here. So I went and go ahead and went in with another deeper color and added a shadow to that shadow. And so that's kind of why I was like, this is not working out. I was kind of freaking out just because I decided that I didn't know what I was going to draw this week. And so I was going to do something in my comfort zone. But then I was like, well, I'll push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit. Instead of doing just a portrait, I'll try to do a dynamic lighting sort of situation so I can push myself a little bit. And then I was like, this is not going well at all because it's not as dark in the shadow as I want it to be, and I'm supposed to be pushing myself, and I'm supposed to make it into darker shadows. And honestly, now that I'm looking at it, I think this is fine. Honestly, if I left it like this, I feel like that is a good enough shadow. But then I was like, it needs to be darker, but I didn't want to make the whole side of the face darker because I felt like it would have been too dark. So I was like, well, I'll just go in with the third darkest color I have and add it as like an even, like, maybe it's like more of a gradient thing. So that's what I decided to do. But also, it doesn't really make sense because it's on the side of her face, but it's also on the underside of her nose, even though that part should be in like more of a bright light. I mean, if the light is bright enough, you won't have any shadows on your face at all. So I was trying to make it a really stark contrast, but then the shadows stopped making sense. And so that's why I was actually starting to panic a little bit. And when I am panicking, I tend to try to just throw more things at the piece in an attempt to fix the issue, but that's how you end up over rendering your piece. And so when I panic, I tend to over render, and I keep like adding things and adding things and adding things, even though it's actually making the piece look worse. And I feel like that's kind of what I ended up doing. Now that, like I said, now that I'm looking at the footage back, I was actually not doing that. I mean, yeah, it makes less sense for the shadows to have like a gradient in them, but like whatever, I'm doing the piece. Like, it doesn't really matter as long as it looks good. I feel like you could get away with a lot of things, right? But yeah, I was worried that I was really falling to the trap of over rendering my piece. And I really didn't want to do that just because it's not that I have had lack of motivation with my art this week. I've been doing this channel for already like 2.5 months, and these are daily videos, so I am running a little bit out of steam, but that's okay. Once I make it past this slump, I think I'll be able to do this forever, honestly. But yeah. So I was just having a little trouble coming up with ideas this week. It's not that I didn't want to draw. I actually did want to draw, but I just didn't know what to draw, and so that was also feeding into my anxiety with coloring this piece, unfortunately. And there was also the fact that I didn't test out my colors beforehand. I did mention that I wanted to make this piece monochromatic, but with pink. So that I did know that I wanted to do that going into it, but I was actually not testing the colors out beforehand. So when it comes to pink, I do prefer a purplish sort of pink like the ones we're using right now. These are the RVs for Copics. If you guys know, that's basically red violet. So they're like the lightest shades. So they're more pink than they are reddish violet. And then there's also the lightest reds that are like the R's. So those are also, they can also come in some pink colors, but I like more of a purple red than I do like an orange red, if that makes sense. Or like a peach red, or more of like a red, like a true red. For pink, right? So I prefer more of a purple red, not a purple red. a purple pink than a red pink, if that makes sense to you guys. So I had these markers and I only have like 5 or 6. So I was like, well, I don't need to blend them because the number system also kind of tells you how saturated they are. But then I forgot that Copic, sometimes the system also doesn't make sense. So it's like, these are all RV whatever, but one of them, it's called Tender Pink. It's like RV, I can't think of it right now. It's like RV03 or something. And it's like, it's more of that reddish pink, like a salmon sort of pink. And I put it in her lips and I was like, ew, what the hell? And you know what? It doesn't look that bad on camera. In real life, I was like, this is really ugly and gross and I hate it. But it doesn't look that bad on camera. And I'm just starting to realize that maybe I should look at the footage some more when I'm doing these. So that way I don't like let my mind trick me into thinking things look worse than they do, because the camera's not going to lie, okay? I mean, obviously, there's ways to touch up things, but this is just raw footage, okay? And also, sure, the lighting changes a little bit versus me looking at it versus the camera looking at it. But you guys are the ones seeing the camera view, okay? I'm the only one who has to see it in real life. So if it's ugly in real life, who cares? As long as it looks good on camera, you know what I mean? Basically, I was just really psyching myself out. I didn't plan out the colors, and so that was also making me a little bit more anxious. I was like, these colors don't go together. It looks really bad. It looks really bad. And it doesn't look bad at all. It doesn't look bad at all. It was just my negative self-talk getting in the way of what otherwise could have been a pretty okay piece. And I really regret that I didn't take a break. But I was like, I have to get this video done. I have no other video ideas. I need to get a video done. And I should have been like, it's okay that I'm gonna get a video done. I am gonna get this video done. This coloring is not gonna take me that long. Just take a minute and breathe, step away, right? Come back to it later. But I didn't think of that because I was so focused on getting it done that I let it get in the way of my artistic process, if that makes sense to you guys, right? Half of the fun of making art is the process of doing it, and I was letting the process of it kind of stress me out more than I needed to. And really, honestly, it was not that bad in the first place. And alrighty, now we're just moving on to the hair. The only valid critique that I would say that I have for this piece is that there is not enough contrast in the hair. I just think that these colors that I have, these pinks, there's not a lot of variation within them. Like, not a lot of transition colors, and I think that they're a little bit too light. I don't really have a lot of midtones for this pink, and I only have like one that would be considered a midtone. I don't really have any colors that would be considered dark for this range, and so I think that's why I was struggling so much with the contrast here, especially in the hair. And so I think I have to just go ahead and find more pinks or buy more pinks in for the Copics. There's a lot of colors for the Copics, but I feel like they're lacking in some colors. Like, they're really lacking in like good purples. I've noticed that. So I have to reach out and find a different marker brand that does better purples that I would prefer. Not that the purples for Copic are bad. There are people who like them, obviously, but I just feel like they're not saturated enough for me. They're all like kind of like a desaturated sort of purple. None of them are really a vibrant sort of purple, if that makes any sense. And so I kind of feel like with the pinks that I like, they don't really have the kind of pinks that I like. Like I said, I do like a more of a purplish sort of pink. So I just have to branch out and find different brands. So if you guys know any brands that do like really good pinks or purples for markers, please let me know, because I'm really in the market for them. And so, since I was really struggling with the contrast for the hair and I was already freaking out about the rest of the piece, I really just went and made a snap decision about coloring in the hair with the darkest pink that I had, so that way I could really get the shadow that I wanted. So, I'm gonna be honest. Like I said at the end of this piece, I don't hate the way it turned out, but I don't think the hair is as strong as it could be, which is unfortunate, but it's also okay because I can fix it. It's not the color so much that I don't like, it's just I feel like I lost all of the detail when I colored over it, which was kind of the point in the reference that I was looking at. The detail of the hair is kind of lost when it's covered in the shadow, but it's okay if you want to stylize things a little bit differently, and I just have to figure out a way that I like to stylize dynamic lighting. Like I said, I don't really practice dynamic lighting. I just really don't practice lighting in general. I never create a light source for my pieces usually. I mean, sometimes it's mostly from the left I like that, but the light source, but then I shade however I want, and so the light source doesn't really end up making any sense. So yeah, I just have to get into a mindset where I can figure out the way that I like to do lighting. And also, I think I have to break the monochromatic nature of this piece a little bit. I don't have any pinks of the same shade that I think would look very good in the shadows of this, so I might have to go with like a contrasting color in the shadows a little bit, just so I could get some of those darkest darks that I really want, that would really push the values of the piece. Like right now, if I translated this to black and white, I feel like there would not be enough contrast and it would be a little bit confusing. Like the lines are giving it a little bit of contrast just because those are the darkest points, right? But I feel like it should be a little bit darker, if that makes sense to you guys. Also, what I think part of the issue is that there is no background for this piece. I started off doing the hair and the skin and stuff, so I can't really get a what's it called, a real idea of what the lighting situation is in this room or wherever she's standing in, right? Because she's just in a white void right now, so I don't really understand the lighting situation. So I'm trying to color in the lighting situation without seeing the lighting situation, if that makes sense. Like the background should be like darker in the back, right, with like a lighter part, so that way I can actually see it. And so I think that's also why I struggled, really thinking that the contrast was not good enough. And then here you go, seeing me coloring in all of the hair with this darkest pink that I have, which is, like I said, I don't think it's a mistake, right? But it did put me in a lot of pain because I was sitting in here and I was like, am I really going to cover all of that hard work I just did? I really am, aren't I? And so I was sitting there hesitating for like 3 minutes. I cut the footage out because it was just me staring at the paper, but I was like, oh my gosh, I really am going to cover it all up. And really, it's not that I feel like it was the wrong choice to make. It was just that it was, I put all that work into coloring the hair and I'm just going to cover it all up. And I was like, I'm not sure if this is going to look good. And there was just like a lot of anxiety there. And so I do cover it all up. You guys can tell me, hey, that actually looks worse. That's okay. It's fine. I can understand why you might think that because, like I said, I was struggling to thinking that maybe it does look worse. And I think that I just have to figure out a way to make the lighting, like I said, the lighting look how I like it, how I would like it to look. And so I'm just trying to figure that out. All right. So you're not going to improve if you don't experiment and try new things. Because if I hadn't done this, I would have been like, oh, well, maybe it's not really the best choice for pieces, right? So now in the future, I know maybe I don't like the way it looks like this. And that's perfectly fine. I'm glad I tried it out so that way I could figure it out. And I'm glad I did it with this piece as opposed to a piece that I really actually super cared about a lot. I did this piece pretty fast. I just sketched it out real quick because I was like, I don't know what to draw. I'll just do a portrait of Kira because one of my newest OCs, one of the OCs you guys have seen the most, and I was just like, I already know what she looks like, so I'll bang out a drawing of her really fast. And also I'm not really upset with the way the coloring turned out because I did save a sketch of this. So if you are wanting to like try out new things with your art and you're like, oh, but I really like the way this sketch turned out, I don't want to ruin the sketch, just take a picture of it and just like reprint it, and then maybe you could put it on like tracing paper and trace it onto a new piece of paper, so that way you don't really lose it. I do that all the time. And then if I don't do it, I always kick myself because I'm always not satisfied with the way colorings turn out. That's just the way that I am. But if that's the way that you are too, take pictures of your art before you color it, so that way you can keep the sketch or the line art or whatever phase you'd like to take the picture at. Just because it's just good practice in case you want to change some things up, or if you're like, well, I don't know what colors I want to go with. If you take a picture, you could color it digitally with whatever colors you want it to look like, and then you could experiment with it before you put it down on actual paper. Oh, and here we go. We see me. I didn't just do it for the hair. I also did it for the skin. The coloring it all in with the same dark color. Because in the reference I used, the hair and the skin was all in the shadow. And so I was like, if I'm doing it with the hair, I should also do it with the skin. And so I did it with the skin. I think I like the way it came out better on the skin than I do the hair because I put so much time and effort into the skin. And even when I cover it up with the same one color, a lot of the detail is still in the skin, which I think makes sense, right? Because even when you're in shadow, there are still different colors on your face. So I like the way it came out much better on the skin than I do with the hair. And then I go in and color the eye, and I feel like the eye doesn't really have that much contrast in it. And so I think if you guys see me work on this piece again, I'm just going to get like some really darker purples and just go ham on it, okay? And that might be a mistake, but I'm gonna do it anyway because, like I said, I already saved the piece. So we're coming to the end of the video, and I do have like 1 or 2 minutes left to talk about stuff, but I just wanted to take a break from talking about the art to go ahead and say thank you guys for 100 subscribers. I think it's really cool how there are so many of you watching my videos now. Some people might be like, 100 subscribers is not a lot of people, but if there was 100 people in the room just watching me draw, I feel like that would be super overwhelming. And so I'm really happy that there are so many of you who like and want to follow my art. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate when you guys drop a like or when you give me comments. I really just appreciate any interaction that you guys want to have with me. Like I said, I always really wanted to talk about my art and just have art to talk about with other people. I've really been anxious about talking to people really more in public, and even on my Instagram, I struggle to talk to people. And so I really like having my YouTube videos because I get to talk and there's no like pressure of having anybody respond or having to respond to anybody else. And when it's just a YouTube comment from you guys, you always say really nice things, and so it just makes me really happy, and it makes it much easier for me to interact with others. And so I really appreciate each and every one of you who subscribes and watches my videos or interacts with my videos in any type of way. And I don't want to make it sound cheesy or anything, but it just makes me really happy. And so I appreciate each and every one of you guys for sitting around and drawing with me just for a little bit. It's just really cool, I think. If I'm being honest, I don't really think that I thought that I would be able to keep making videos for even 3 months. When I started this channel, it was just supposed to be like a New Year's resolution because I've already tried to do YouTube videos in the past and I kind of failed. But this time, I think it's actually going pretty well. So hopefully you guys continue to stick around and watch my videos with me and just doodle a little bit. So that's all for today's video. Thank you guys for spending this time with me. I'll go ahead and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.